Anything you could do, I heard it done before, better, but I could do you in 36 positions. And then you like the Wu-Tang debut now, who remain true to the game. Damn shame it wasn't you. Fools lay claim to fly rhymes, but I terrorize airlines. My mind's a porcelain Glock 7, slipping through the metal detector, ready to wet you like baptism. It's rap pugilism when I be placing 208 bones in one zone. With microphones, I'm like the Blade Runner hunting clones. Shimon, I beat it like one glove in a bad nose job with more breathing techniques than Lamar's. Raz still be drinking more liquor brews and continues the liquidation to cruise with a drunken technique like Shundi's Kung Fu and Virtual Fighter 2. See me, son, I'm the one sporting Dolce & Gabbana. Peeling this sucker's wig back like cradle cap. You ain't no cap pillar for real, and for who you desire to kill, you need more God than Zilla. I break some off like acrylic nails. Test me, but you appear to be Presley like Priscilla. And still malicious disses, but this is 10% diss, 90% skill. So curses, you're foiled again like Hershey's Kisses. They so-called vicious, although how you gonna be a menace when it ain't no man in it? Oh, they reminiscences. Now in a new year, a new fear, and I'm nuclear. Let's play a friendly game of who can ruin whose career.
3, 2, 1, action.
Welcome to the legendary Patchwerk Studios. Yeah, it's here. And I've been here a while. Long time. I remember when it first started. Me and Curtis, OutKast, BJ, everybody was all hands on deck because we was trying to do something major and monumental. Something that can really stand the test of time and really bring people together. And I think that was the biggest thing with Patchwerk. There was a lot of work involved, but we came from the Patch. And that's where the name comes from. A small neighborhood in Carson, California is where we were family, we was brothers, and we wanted to do something, and this is what we did together. So
Patchwerk Recording started in 93. Patchwerk Recording Studios started in 95. Me, Bob, and Raz are all from the Patch, which is the Cabbage Patch. CPG is what we call it, Cabbage Patch Gangsters. Which is in Carson, California. They're bloods in our neighborhood. Bob has an older brother, Paris, man, he's been in jail, seems like the whole time. I know for the whole time we've had the studio because he's never seen it. So he may have been in jail now for about 27, 28 years or so. But Bob is 1 year older than me. He was born in 71 with my sister. I was born in 72. But me and Bob both have older brothers that are the same age. So my older brother and Bob's brother, they ran together. They grew up together, they hung out, they was in the same crew, same clique or whatever. And me and Bob, we've been going to the same kindergarten, elementary, junior high, and high school. Our relationship probably started when we were playing at the park, playing t-ball together. And so that's from the age of about 7 years old until now. We're about 48. We didn't meet Raz until I met Raz. Raz didn't go to our elementary. He came to our junior high school, Carnegie Junior High School. And really the way we forged a relationship was because I remember one time we had a track meet and Raz was probably about the same size, about 5'7" or whatever he is, 5'8". And I was probably about 6'1", 6'2" at the time. And that little joker probably beat me in the high jump. And so his respect for me was gained because his little ass was jumping over that high bar. And so basically that's kind of how he got in the clique or whatever. We were, back then it wasn't even doing music. So it was about athletics, academics or gangbanging. And so he folded into our niche by being athletic, you know what I mean? And got to know him and realized he lived around the corner. And that was that. And Raz really he was known for drawing. He can draw his ass off and he could dance. So he was in the dance crew. And that's what I knew him for, and then we shared a love for music. And so, we just started inviting him over when we would be playing dominoes and all this stuff. And so, fast forward to, Bob, funny thing about him, playing football, he had left the Patch and moved to Vallejo at one point for a couple years in the Bay Area. And then he came back to go to high school in the 9th grade. And 10th grade year, he played JV, didn't get to play. But going into his senior year, Bob became the #1 rated lineman in the nation. He was the best in the nation. He could have went anywhere he wanted to. He was a 4.0 student. And he went to Stanford. And to get to the music, while he was in school, then I got a football scholarship to Michigan State, and I still coming home, we would kick it with the homies. Whenever we came home, we either be playing dominoes at my house or Raz's house or shooting dice at Bob's house. That's what we was doing, and we was rotating. And I found out Raz could rap, and Bob ended up getting drafted by the Falcons and had a shitload of money, man. He was the highest paid lineman in NFL history on 3 different occasions. So he had a shitload of money and was like 22, 23 years old. And I don't know, in the conversation I found out that he was buying equipment and putting it in the house. And Bob kind of likes to mess around with stuff, and he may not see the idea all the way through. And I told him he should send the equipment to Raz because he's dope. And that's kind of how we got started, man. That's a long story, but that's how we got started. We naively thought, I always tell people that being from Carson is weird. You got to be there. I personally don't think we should have any gangsters because everyone that lives there has 2 parents and they live in a $500,000, $600,000 house. It's crazy. But anyway, we do have our little gangs or whatever. But growing up there, I think the common thing from people from there is that, you got both parents in the home and everybody on your block is married, and it's real stable, and your parents kind of teach you that you can do anything that you want to do. Now that's just a saying. So typically the mom is encouraging you and telling you to dream and you can do what you want to do. But then the dad is following up that statement by demonstrating and telling you, but yeah, you got to work for it and you got to practice for it. So we literally came out of that place thinking that we can do whatever we wanted to do. We wanted to play football, and we got scholarships to go to college, which, D1 colleges. And then, one of the other homies wanted to play and he went pro, got drafted first round. And then one of the other homies believed he can rap and he became one of the dopest artists ever. So we just thought that we can do anything. And if it was hard, we just figured we needed to work at it. So we thought that, the first thing was we just thought that we can record a record and Raz would get a deal. That's what we heard. Go get a record deal. So we was like, he's dope, he's incredible, we like him. Make a song and somebody assign him. And we did that and nobody liked him. And we still believed in him. And so then we created a record label and we put out a project. We put out a single with a B-side. And then it created a bidding war with every single label that you can imagine. And we ended up signing with Priority. And then when we put out the first album, back then they had big budgets, and we realized that we had spent over $200,000 on production and recording. And so us being young and dumb and naive, then we figured, well, we should just do our own studio. So that's how the studio got here.
Bob was about to graduate when we was in the 10th, and through Curtis, Bob started picking me up going to school. And pick me up, and that's where it really started. So Bob would pick me up and pick Bertie Kurt up, and then we'd go to school. This one time, I think we were at Curtis's house, maybe. But I think we might have been in my house. And so I decided I had this demo. I had like 4 or 5 songs, thanks to DJ Battlecat and Wino, who produced for Coolio and Domino Theory and whatever. So I had been working on my music. I didn't tell my friends what I was doing, but that's what I was doing. I was working on music. And Curtis has always been one of the most critical hip hop heads. He's just critical, like he's a connoisseur. Some people are consumers, they just buy whatever. They buy what's popular. Curtis was like me. He just studied lyrics. He the whole record. And so I really wanted his opinion, but I didn't want a biased opinion. So one way or another, I didn't want some people knowing it was me and like it because it was me or shit on it because it was me. And so there were probably about 5 or 6 of us playing dominoes. Niggas always had music playing. I took somebody's tape out and I put my tape in. And then niggas was like, who you playing? I was like, oh, just some new nigga. Some new nigga, I think he's from New York. I lied. I'm like, yeah, I think some new nigga. I played it, and then niggas didn't say turn that shit off, it's whack. By the second song, Kurt was like, yo, who's this nigga, man? This nigga kind of dope. This nigga dope. I'm like, I don't know, man. I forgot his name. Like some New York nigga, you know what I'm saying? I don't know. By the fourth song, the nigga said, God damn it, whoever this nigga is the hardest nigga, period. Nigga, this nigga hard. And I said, it's me. And he said, bitch, I ain't you. Because you know he the only nigga that can call me bitch. Like, niggas don't really like, you call him a bitch, but that's how he talks. He's like, bitch, that ain't you. I was like, nigga, that's me on everything. I was listening to the voice. And then the nigga teared up and he said, like a little bit, he said, John, that's you? And I was like, yeah. And he said, my friend is the greatest rapper I ever heard. And that was the beginning. My friend, who I knew was a connoisseur, believed in me. And the rest of the journey would go on to create Patchwerks, but it starts from there, period. That's how this shit starts. It's an idea, it's an inception, and then it becomes physical. I made some mistakes. I go off to juvenile hall because I'm not 18 yet. I go off, I'm gone for about a year and maybe a half or something. And when I come out, I talk to Kurt, and Kurt says, have you talked to Boobie? Have you talked to Bob? I'm like, nah, you know what I'm saying? And I'm home, and you know, like I'm kind of getting pressurized, like you better get your life together, because you fucked up. You're a fuck up now, you're a fucking felon kid. And I said, no, I haven't talked to him. And Kurt was like, you know, Boobie wasted some money on some fashion shit and this, that, and the third. Like, you should fucking do music with Boobie, because he went to the Falcons, and you know, he's playing professional now. And I didn't know that. Like, I always supported Bob, like, you know, even, you know, when he went off to college. But you know, people older and people, you know, grow. So my whole thing was I didn't bother him, and I was very happy and proud of his success in football. And I knew, and Bob's very smart. He's like a science and math whiz also. You know, most times people think of like a dumb jock. He's not a dumb jock. He was just an accidental jock, whereas he really was like a math whiz nigga. And so it was just awesome watching him go on his journey, and I was always proud of him and happy for him. I never thought like what angle I could use to get support from him. I had done everything kind of on my own anyway. And it was Kurt's suggestion. And then Bob was with it. And then from there, to be perfectly honest, Bob sent, I don't even know if we had a name yet, but Bob sent BJ. BJ stayed at my house for about 9 months and kind of managed me. And we decided we'd be, you know, Bob came up with the name Patchwerks. It's niggas from the Patch doing work. So the Patch is a city in Carson before it's the studio in Atlanta. And yeah, that's pretty much the story of the foundation of Patchwerks. So Kurt was supposed to really be the manager. Bob and BJ would be the execs. Bob financed it, BJ kind of the exec, I'm the artist. And it was really, it's kind of a trinity, but it was really a four-cornered room. Those were the positions.
Me and Bob went to school together, and Bob was Stanford. Bob was a football player, and he was, you know, gonna be in the draft. Like, everybody knew he was gonna go pro. And there was a few guys, a couple of my partners, that I used to hang with all the football players in school. My roommates was always, well, not always, but football players. So a few of the guys was gonna go get drafted. And we were just talking about business, because I wanted to be in real estate. Curtis came down, we were still in the process of like building a studio. But me and Curtis were still talking when he was in Michigan, talking, emailing, like working on the business plan, the marketing plan, the whole strategy of how we were gonna make this a success, not just hip hop. Like, you know, a lot of people just open up studios, especially athletes, and they don't really take it seriously. Us being in school and we not playing football, we not, you know, we ain't got millions of dollars. So we gotta make something that's for real, you know, that's gonna have longevity, a real business. But Bob, he wasn't thinking like that. I think Bob was just thinking, you know, for fun, you know. Like he said, like Curtis was saying, he had some of his partners just, you know, in the building doing whatever. You know what I mean? They was, one of his partners used to do the cell phones, where you burn the cell phones and beepers and all of that stuff, where you don't have to pay the bills. He was selling cell phones out of there. And another Lionel was doing cars, washing cars in the parking lot, all that type of stuff. So one thing that we said, me and Curtis, when we start, we're gonna cut all that out. This ain't finna be no hangout. It's not finna be no clubhouse. You know, it's gonna be a real business. And we wrote that into the business plan. And I still got the original marketing plan, like step by step, like this is how we're gonna run it. And we're gonna, you know, stand on that. Even with Bob, to the point we would be arguing with Bob because he would wanna come and smoke weed with his football players, you know, his homies, and bring girls. And we literally have to be like, no, dude, you can't trap it out. Like, we trying to run a business, you know, no commingling of funds. You know, Bob was using the credit card for whatever he wanted to, the Patchwerk credit card, all that type of stuff was going on. But eventually Bob, you know, had to respect it, and he would back off and say, all right, even though he would do it sometimes. But that, I think, is one of the reasons why Patchwerk is still here 25 years later versus other studios, because from the very beginning, we set out for the studio to be ran like that. We say if somebody came to work the front desk, to be a manager or whatever, who it is, all we have to do is hit them with the manual, say, boom, here it is. It's easy. It's not rocket science. You know, the engineer got to learn this stuff, but somebody just working here, this is what you do. When you get to work, the first thing you do is this, A, B, C, D. Turn off the alarm, go check this, make sure that whatever it is you're supposed to do, you know, make sure that the reports, I don't know how y'all do it now, but back then, everything was handwritten, the studio sessions, make sure that the reels was put back, you know, make sure the room is locked up, make sure it's toilet paper, all those little things, you know, anybody could come sit at that desk and we can give you this operating manual. You know, just like McDonald's, dude quit, somebody else can come in here. First thing you do in the morning, you come in, turn the grease on, then you do this, boom, 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 A, B, C, D. Make it simple, because we used to use that analogy too. Like, we want the customer's experience to be the same. If they came here and they came here 5 years later, we want that experience to be the same. Just like if you go to McDonald's here or New York or London, the fries gonna taste the same. You know, the filet of fish, all of that's gonna be the same. The amount of tartar sauce they put on it, we wanted the studio to run like that. So people would say, hey, this is just not no, you know, football players or just no rap studio. You know, it's professional. We get our reports, we get our bill, you know, here's what it cost, you know, we send you out the rate sheets, you know, when we book you, when you come, your time, you know, it ain't gonna be, you gotta wait an hour, 2 hours. We come in, you know, all of those things that I'm sure how Curtis still has it set up and run. That was our, you know, intention from the very beginning, and we set out to say that, because like Curtis was like, he ain't from here, I ain't from here. He's like, I don't want to just come to Atlanta, you know, just to hang out and have a business that lasts for a couple of years. You know, I mean, just think, Curtis has been here 20-something, 25 years now. That's all he ever did.
I've had a relationship with Patchwerk Studios since it began, since its inception. I remember the first, when Patchwerk first came, Curtis was building his staff and building his systems, and I remember how I worked closely with him to make sure that the studio was equipped with all of the tools and essentials that we needed to have a successful recording session with OutKast and Organized Noise. We were in it for the long term. We were in it to see Patchwerk win. I was always a champion for this studio because these guys were new. They were coming into Atlanta, and I knew they had a vision and a dream, and I wanted to see that vision and dream work.
I've been working with Patchwerk since, I guess, day one. 25 years we've been working with Curtis and, at the time, Bob and Mike. So we've known these guys as long as we've been making music in Atlanta on a real, like, kind of professional, steady basis. Before Patchwerk's opened, I think there was, I can't even remember the name of the studio now. Country, oh sheesh. It was probably like 5 studios, but they were like owned by rock guys. Like, and you know, it was one on Chester Bridge, and I can't think of the name of it to save my life. I just remember Brendan O'Brien, who did like like B-52s and stuff, they were there all the time. And you had Bosstown, which is, where we were working the most. That was owned by Bobby Brown at the time. It's now Stank on You. But those were studios that were owned by other people and we didn't have the access to them. And because Patchwerk was new, we kind of got in on the ground floor and kind of had like a open door policy for us. Like we always had room here. So it was a great thing for us because I think the studios were built for like bigger R&B. They were built for like bigger productions. And at the time, hip hop wasn't like a big thing in Atlanta. It was just starting to bubble. And it felt like a rap studio for us. It felt like a hip hop studio because the people in it were like our age. Like Bob Whitfield played for the Falcons, so we knew who he was culturally. The engineers were young. Like I went to high school. Well, I lived next door to Jarvis when I would go to my aunt's house. Like it was a community. It felt like more community based.
The studio scene was basically just regular. You would find spots here and there that had good vibes, right? But they never had the look of a real studio. Now you had a lot of studios around the city, but their vibes weren't as strong as Patchwerk. You know what I'm saying to you? There's a like I said earlier, there's a dynamic between grand and vibe, right? Studios, at the end of the day, has nothing to do with grand, right? It's everything about the vibe, but you gotta have the right equipment too. At the same time, it's a weird double-edged sword. Gotta have the right equipment, gotta have the right engineer, but your vibe gotta be just as good as both of those things before, right? And the vibe of Patchwerk had all that. And other studios, they had other things. I remember studios being very sterile. Like, they would have all the first two, but no vibe, no energy to them, man. And it'd be just like, no vibe. Like, I would sit in studios sometime, man, and just be like, man, what the?
Any studio that was our competition had a 2-inch reel. So our push this entire time was, we need to move from this 8-at setup that we've got that's almost obsolete to we need a 2-inch reel in the studio, because if we can get a 2-inch reel in here, we can try to woo some of these other clients from these other studios. There was, LaFace had a studio, Dallas had a studio, Silent Sound Studios was right up the street. So there were a number. Purple Dragon was another studio that was around at that time. And all of these were sort of larger, more well-known studios for Atlanta recording artists. Now, we had some artists by this time, we had some artists that were coming through, but we didn't have any artists by the magnitude of OutKast that had come through the studio yet. And I don't know what Curtis did. I just remember that he cut some sort of sweet deal with LaFace that got OutKast to come to our spot. I don't know if it was LaFace or Organized Noise, but something he did, he's got the gift of gab. So whatever he did, it worked. And he was able to get OutKast there. I found out that the Dungeon family, which was Rico and them, were big Falcon fans. And we invited them to, and then Dee was kind of management, so it kind of went through Dee. And I asked them, did they want to go to the game? And she was like, sure. And I was like, how many tickets you need? And she was probably like 23. And so she wanted to come by and pick up the tickets. And I was like, nah, anybody that want to go to the game got to come to the studio. And then we're going to do a tour, and then they can get a ticket to the game. So what ended up happening, we were so close to the dome, about 2.5 miles, everybody met up here, and then we carpooled. So some people left their cars here. So we went to the game. We was in the first 2 rows. It was lit, and then we came back after the game and they started working. And that's kind of how it happened. And then, at that game, everybody was there. So all the Organized Noise, all the OutKast, Goody Mob, probably TLC, and a bunch of other people. And, we, throughout the years, everybody in the music industry was our guest at the game. You know what I mean? People do that now where they have suites and they invite people, but we unwittingly was doing that when we started. Like, hey, you want to go to a game? Sure, you know what I mean? So we would build relationships at the game and then come back and work. And, it worked.
Most of this AT Aliens album was recorded in Patchwerk. And the reason why we came to Patchwerk was because there was really no place in Atlanta to record. At the time, we had done the OutKast Southern Playalistic album, and that thing popped. And what was happening was all of these other production companies and producers were dissecting our album. We put everything on the credits on where we recorded, who we recorded with, who our musicians were, who our engineers were. And what we saw happening was the places that we were recording was getting booked up. So we were like, okay. So it was my job to really kind of figure out, where can I find a long-term facility where OutKast and Organized Noise and Goody Mob can live. They can record privately, where they'll be safe, where they can bring people in, where they can vibe. They like to smoke. That was kind of like a little issue at first, but I was like, look, Curtis, they smoke. I cannot unsmoke these dudes. They smoke. It is not going to be realistic to tell those guys that they can't smoke in the studio. We're going to have to come to a happy medium. They're going to have a place to smoke. So we came to a happy medium, and it was hard, but they learned how to not smoke in the control room. It was very difficult, but we made it work. So I remember it. I love that place. It was like being at home, and it was very comfortable. It was a loving atmosphere. Bob was very, very hands-on in everything that we did.
And that was another thing, the professionalism of it. It just made me feel like, yeah, you can come here and work. Yeah, like no problem. So when you make all your clients feel like, they're special, they can work, you can create your music here at this place, it just make you feel, like I'm part of the club. I was feeling like I was a part of the club, and I wasn't even making music yet.
It was upscale hood studio though. Patchwerk was the hood, but in a good way. You know what I'm saying to you? It's kind of like you go to the studio and it ain't always clean. It ain't always buffed. It's not like a hospital. It was really like going to your basement. That's what Patchwerk was. It's like going to your basement. You got a studio in your house, and it's just like the vibe is just crazy, man. And the mic is in the closet or in the bathroom, and y'all sitting around shooting the shit and having a good time, and everybody's enjoying the moment, man. And hey, man, do whatever, man. And here comes, you end up making something great out of that, right? Out of nothing. Patchwerk was the out of nothing with all the right equipment and all the right engineers, between Mike, I think Mike was there too, and Josh. Mike and Josh were the two main engineers then. And it was just crazy, man. It was a great vibe between Breed, God rest Breed, Pac. Everybody went to Patchwerk, just to be honest with you, bro. Everybody went. That's just, as I talk, man, the memories come back. You get what I'm saying to you? Everybody went to Patchwerk. Like, it was an honor to go to Patchwerk. It was close in the city. You ain't gotta go 9,000 miles to the other studio to get that type of quality of sound, too. You get what I'm saying to you? You had to go far a lot of times to get good vibes. But Patchwerk had great vibes. Always great vibes.
The engineer at the time that I remember most working closely with was Jason Staten. And we just all worked together to make sure that everything was in place. We had all the tapes we needed, because back then we was recording on 2-inch tape. We had the tape machines, and we was mixing down to 1/2 inch. we had to get them 2-inch tapes, and we always had to make copies of them. The term that was used back in the industry back in that days, we had to make it. We had masters, and we had to make slaves for those masters. And the slaves stayed in the studio just in case something happened to the master in transportation, because we wasn't emailing stuff or sending stuff even over digital lines. We were mailing tapes. to studios in New York and transporting via courier tapes from one studio in Atlanta to the next. That was an integral part of the process. And if the tapes wasn't there and set up an hour before the artist or so were supposed to even enter the facility, you failed. You know, and it was like you needed to have the studio set up, you need to have the sessions pulled up, and then it's a waiting game. You and your engineer, you sit there and wait for the talent to show up, and that could be for hours. You know, and Curtis was like, you know, he came into this game with this business mind. Like, Diddy, we had a session at 3:00 and it's 4:30 and nobody's here. I'm like, they coming? So, you know, it was that type of thing. It was a learning curve, but we all worked together and we came up with a very successful, legendary product, which is this puppy right here.
The original facility, I remember, Patchwerk, it was in a house on the corner of the street from where this studio is now, at the top of Hemp Hill, and the corner of Hemp Hill and 10th Street. And you walk into this house, and it was like from the outside, it was just it looked like a 2-level house. And you walk in, and it was, I want to say it's purple. Yeah, I feel like it was purple, which, I don't know why it was purple, but it had a vibe. And you walk in, you can go past the reception, go all the way down the hall to the studio, which is probably like past a lounge, an office, another office, bathroom, vocal booth, into the main room. And that main room was what is now the 955 room here at Patchwerk. And that's where we made Parental Advisory's whole last album, I think. My Life Entertainment. No, we made that here too. But we made 2 albums there. We did OutKast, we did Dungeon Family stuff, we did Youngbloods, T.I. Yeah, man, we worked in that studio.
The house was dope. The house was dope because obviously it was a house, you know, so it's a different feeling, it's a warmer feeling, you know, being that it was just a big ass house, makeshift house, I guess, you know. So you had downstairs, you had, boom, you walk in the door, you had immediately you had like the desk, lobby, you know, area with a couch right next to the desk, and the couch was like the therapy couch, you know. Of course, you had the pool room, which was like the lounge, you know, was in the front, and in the back you had kitchen, studio was all the way to the back. You know, you had like a little smaller lounge. I wouldn't even call it a lounge area, across from the studio, you know, and then upstairs was pretty small. Upstairs you just had, I believe, like 2 offices. I believe it was just 2 offices, yeah. Bob had an office, and then BJ had an office, and then there was a smaller room in the back that I used to sit at. And I worked records at college radio, you know? So I'm gonna tell you this, the dopest thing about that is still some people, like my job as an intern was to ship out records, you know? I used to ship out records. Back then you had the college radio list, the Gavin Report, you know? So we used to ship records out to DJs, mostly all college DJs predominantly. You know, I wouldn't say all, but predominantly college DJs, sending them. But then back then you had pirate radio stations and things like that as well. So it was always, you know, it was always a discovery. It was always adding a name to the database. You know, it's not obviously like today, this was like manual. So a lot of stuff you had to learn word of mouth, you know, someone turn you on to another DJ. So the dopest thing though is like, it's still people to this day that I'm cool with, that I met back in the day on the phone, like a guy named Mick, DJ Mick out of Brooklyn. Back then he was Mick Boogie, you know, he was going to school in Ohio, I forgot which school, but I would call dude on the phone, you know, I would call him on the phone, yo, you got your records? On the phone in his dorm room, you know, and today he's like a DJ, like DJing all around the world, like investing in tech companies, you know, so I mean, to see him and his success is just dope. Every time, you know, we speak or see each other, it's just a good feeling, you know, just like, damn, like we came up out of that, you know? So I met a few people, man. KO the producer, I met KO like that. KO was a producer and, well, actually he was working at a radio station in Montgomery, Alabama. And he had beats, and he's like, yo, I got beats. And he used to send me beats, you know. And I started dialogue with him, you know, like, oh, word, you know, going back and forth, and invited him to Atlanta. So by the time I started Grand Hustle, you know, he started producing on records, you know. And he's come up and grown as a producer, you know. So it's just dope to really kind of think back and recall, like, those type of encounters that really matriculated from that.
It was a fuck spot. We used to get bitches acting up. Niggas was not trying to record nothing. Niggas was still thinking they had no good engineer because Bob was running it. Kurt wasn't running it. Bob was playing football and being Bob. You know what I'm saying? BJ was being BJ. And then I'm coming through and I got Blue, BMF, Da Vinci before the BMF shit, and my cousins, the Dismos, my homies, and Speedy, gang of Crip niggas and shit. I'm coming through with my young, dumb friends, and we just like, where that quad at, where all the little girls at the school at? Like, drop us off over there, we'll be back. So no, it was innocent. It was innocently fucked, because we were not getting no work done. We weren't. It was a big spot. It used to be a radio station. It's right up the street. And slowly but surely, they started getting it in order. But initially, no. Corrupt. Nigga, Kurt, you saw them pictures of corrupt. Just Crip niggas and, you know, Bob them, you know, the Patch is a blood neighborhood. So you got some blood niggas and some Crip niggas. It was just here looking for some bitches. Because everybody rap. Niggas rap, and we just were like, where the bitches at? And we was drunk, and it was awesome.
Have you seen a closet? Basically, it was 3 closets. It was a closet that was the vocal booth, a closet next door to it that we turned into a machine room, and we had and those went into a room that was a little bit larger that we called the control room. Now, when we had the equipment in the room, the speakers were so big compared to the room that you couldn't hear the bass in the room really. So that's why I was saying we're gonna be the best tracking studio ever. But we did come up with a workaround. So what we did was we took Michael Jackson Thriller and just put it on repeat. And we actually walked around the building, right? And it turned out to be maybe 12 feet down the hall. And that was the place where that song sounded perfect. So we marked that place. So when we would mix, we really wouldn't do it with clients there. We would go do our thing, go to the sweet spot, which is down the hall, listen, take notes and say we have to change, go back, make the changes, and that's how we would mix. So it was really, and it, you know, and a few of those, well, a lot of those mixes were taken and put out for distribution, but we would never settle ourselves as a mix room at that time, but we did do mixes.
A pretty standard 2-story building with a glass front window, which I remember got shattered when Patchwerk got raided a long time ago for some crazy stuff. I mean, basically, the studio was all different colors. There was a lot of purple furniture and like multicolor furniture in the main areas and in like the kitchen area. The upstairs area was dedicated to the label, and that's where BJ had his office, Bob had an office up there, and then we had an area with like where we had the interns and just the shared activities for the label. Downstairs was the studio area, so the studio was in the very back.
And then behind, one of the things we made a mistake is to get to our tape room, you had to walk through the vocal booth to get to where the 2-inch machine was. But we dealt with it and we made it do what it do.
It was a purple and black house that sat on the corner of 10th and Hemp Hill. It was a beautiful place. Bob Whitfield's mom was very instrumental in the decorations. And I remember even before all of the accoutrements were put in the studio, Curtis and Bob were very concerned and wanted to know exactly what I thought would needed to be in a studio for our artists to be comfortable. And I remember telling them we need to make sure we have a game console, some snacks, just a little. So I remember when Curtis bought the vending machine and put in the studio. So I remember all of that. It was a beautiful time when they were painting and, everything was that shiny black and pretty purple and it was all lush and velvety. It was a beautiful place.
It was interesting because it was the first time I had been in a real recording studio, especially where, this is where OutKast had recorded at the time, Dungeon Family, LaFace Projects. So, but it was a house. And I thought it was unique how each room of the house was converted to an office. One of the back rooms was like a fulfillment center where it's like shipping and, all the promotional stuff. But I remember that house, being very integral once I got connected because I spent a lot of time, at the time I was doing work for Patchwerk. They had a label, and OutKast, Mean Green, and Voodoo were artists that were signed to the label. And so I was there a lot, and I used to always see and experience like this little tiny little home that just had all this energy, so it was a cool experience.
I'm gonna say the first thing that comes to my mind is purple walls. I think I don't know why I'm seeing purple walls. If I remember correctly, right. Black leather lounge, like sofas and everything. You know what I'm saying?
The pool table. Remember the pool table?
I'm trying to remember the pool table
out there in the area.
And I gotta say, man, this is just it's been so long, man. This is the only things that stick in my head. I just remember purple walls, if I'm correct. I remember black leather furniture, you know what I'm saying? So it's back in them good old days, man, you know what I mean?
Yeah. Remember we recorded, we took the mic outside of the studio.
And we was sounds.
Yeah, sounds. I think that's when we were doing Shake 'em Out. Kurt let us take the damn mic outside.
The studio itself, man, had such a vibe because it was small in comparison to most studios of that caliber. You get what I'm saying to you? It had such a great vibe, and I think that what people don't get is not really about how the studio looks, but it's really about the equipment, the engineers, and the vibe of the studio. And Patchwerk had that vibe that if you wanted to work, you could work, right? You weren't worried about people coming in your sessions. There's a lot of, back then we had a lot of studio etiquette, right? You would sit in the studio all day. Nobody would come in your session. They would just assume that someone was back there, so they wouldn't just come back there, right? The studio itself, man, the smells, the smells I'm talking about. The smells were just like, fumigating throughout the studio, man. It was just like this vibe, and across the street they had the pizza spot, and then, you get hungry, you go get the pizza. And I'm a fat guy, something. I'm remembering food, you know what I mean? So, it was just a great vibe. You stand outside, sit out, talk shit, whatever you're gonna do, and then go back in the session. You know what I'm saying to you? It was just a kind of a vibe of music.
So when you hear all the stories about that studio, you always hear about the vibe in the studio, and the vibe was set by that purple carpet. Nobody had really seen that in the paint on the wall and the abstract art that Bob's mom, Eartha, and Bob had done. You know what I mean? They just went crazy with it. I think that carpet was probably like, when you go to the store and they got the returned and the defunct stuff, and they probably was like, we can get all this carpet for cheap. So they just went with it, but it did create a vibe.
What's crazy is all the hits that was made out there, because it was a house. It wasn't really made like a real studio with the walls, the acoustics, the speakers was sitting on pedestals. Them speakers wasn't really no good either. Big old speakers sitting on these things. They used to bust all the time. But it did create a certain sound that a lot of people liked, like a real warm sound. Like, to me, what personifies that sound of 995 McMillan is elevators. Whenever I hear that song, I always think, man, that's the original Patchwerk sound. The 2-inch reels, the ceilings was low. It wasn't nothing like this, obviously, but it did create a hip hop sound And I remember a lot of artists would say that. I remember talking to Pimp C, like he really loved the room because he was like, he didn't like all of that fancy, as he was calling it, you know, a kind of a gritty sound you would get out of there. You know, it was warm, but it was still had the feeling like, you know, like it was some hip hop shit, not produced in some big, you know, high-end studio.
In terms of like memories of the early state of things, it was always like a super vibrant place in terms of activity. I feel like when I moved here, it was when like bass music was definitely like a big thing in Atlanta. So a lot of the artists that were at Patchwerk Recording when I first moved here were like B-Rock and the Biz, and like a lot of the artists that were doing more of the bass music, which is what they played on the radio at that time on the urban stations.
First Patchwerk, what this was, J-Bo? 98 maybe? 99 when we started getting our little budget together, man, coming in there recording. Man, let me tell you, man, the energy was crazy, man. You know what I'm saying? Because they were big to us, you know what I mean? We had just got our deal, man. We in the major studios, you know what I'm saying? All the artists that we see, you know what I mean, in the industry that we came up to and stuff, we see them come in and out. So this was our first, you know, taste of the industry, man. It was beautiful. Let me tell you, though, tell some stories, man. Because I'm sure we messed up our budget a couple times, you know what I'm saying? Man, in the Attic crew, that's who we is, you know what I'm saying? Sometimes we get a little drunk, man, you know what I mean? Get way too high, I ain't gonna lie to you, you know what I'm saying? I remember some of the boys were wrestling, man, might put a hole in the wall, you know what I'm saying?
Man, I remember that.
So, I know, hey, man, I just want to thank Kurt for just, you know what I'm saying? Just dealing with us, man. You know what I'm saying? You know, I know he like, man, the Attic crew boy, man, good. Then I don't know what I'm doing with these boys. But I'm sure he got it. I'm sure he got back good out the budget. So you know what I'm saying? Much love, Kurt.
I remember being in that small studio, but back then it felt really big. That's crazy though. Like I remember the studio being really, really big to me. Maybe because it was the moment and the fact that we didn't have a lot of those kind of studios in the city at the time. And Patchwerk was the kind of studio at that time that was state of the art.
And then the whole feeling of the building, you know, hanging out in there, the vibe, you know, just the way it was set up, the pool table, like it was real, because it was a house, so it felt like that, you know? So when people came, it had, kind of like how Organized Noise talk about the dungeon, like, you know what I mean? Like when you go to the dungeon, how it was the feeling of some early hip hop stuff. And so Curtis came down, and me and Curtis would work on a lot of the business end of the stuff. Like we did, you know, I remember I was fresh out of school, Curtis was still in school, so we thinking from school, you know, write a business plan, write a marketing plan, you know, put all of these strategies and tactics together, research what type of software we're gonna use to keep track of everything, which was good because, you know, a lot of people just don't start their business like that. But that foundation, you know, as proven now 25 years later, setting that foundation is what leads to longevity. Like, and a lot of the stuff that sounds cliche, or a lot of the stuff that sounds like, you know, the customer service adages that you hear people say, like we really took it seriously.
Which is crazy too. I think before they moved over here, we recorded 85 over there. One of our biggest songs at Patchwerk.
All right, true.
Yeah. And this is crazy too about the first Patchwerk. This was when Reels was around. Our first album was on the Reel.
Yeah, hell too.
Yeah, but nah, we can't hear Pro Tools in then. Yeah.
I mean, if I'm correct, when we first came in, we were still on Reel. Pro Tools. I mean, Pro Tools was something you had to pay extra for. You remember they used to roll it on in, you know what I mean?
On a little cart.
Yeah, you know what I'm
on a little cart.
The 2-inch reels, man, analog, it was like, wow, next level, you know what I'm saying to you? And it became the narrative for what studios were supposed to be in Atlanta. Patchwerk has always did grade A service, and I think a lot of studios kind of patterned themselves after that mantra, that you become who you are. And I remember from that moment, just at that studio, I always knew what studios were supposed to look like, right? And we had other studios around the city, but Patchwerk was always that one staple that I know that everybody went to, whether it was me or Jim Crow or Black Market or OutKast, Organized Noise, and the list goes on and on. Tupac. Everybody came to Patchwerk for that quality sound, and ever since the 90s, it's been A1. I can't remember one time I ever recorded in any one of these studios, the one up the street and this studio here, even in the 9,000 room, where the sound and engineers 1A1. And it's just been a very outstanding blessing to be a part of the history of this studio.
Bob was leasing that building, and we did all of those improvements, and the dude was playing games. So every year we would sign a 12-month lease. And then, say if we signed it in January, and in November, we only had a month left. So we would go to him and say, we want to buy the building. And then he would play games and say, it's not for sale. We sign a new lease in January. He'll come to us in February and say, I want to sell it. Here's the sale price. Plus I want 10 months worth of lease. You know what I mean? That's what he was playing. So we kept trying to buy when we didn't have nothing, so we can just pay whatever, $400,000 for the building. He wanted the $400,000 and 11 months worth of rent. And that kept happening. And he sold the building without telling us to Georgia Tech. And he never was going to tell us. I mean, we had a storm and it knocked our awning down. So I called him to tell him to fix it. And that's when he told me he didn't own the building anymore. And I took a pause. I said, what you mean? And he was like, yeah, I sold it. I said, did you tell Bob? He said, no, I'm telling you now. And so I had to tell Bob that, he didn't own the building and we only had like 3 or 4 months left on the lease and we had to get out. And he told them that, hey, it's best not to let these guys know. They kind of like some hip hop rappers. They may damage the building. So we never know. He sold it. It wasn't like it was no for sale sign. Nobody ever came and toured the facility or nothing. He just sold the shit and we was asked out. And it wasn't until they came over after they own it. I remember it was about 6 people came over and we had to give them a tour and they met us and they was like, you guys aren't bad at all. And it was like, you know what? We won't be ready for this shit till about another 6 or 8 months. You guys could stay here and just pay us the rent. And then at that time, so that gave us a few more months to find this facility and get out. But that was the dirty part. You know what I mean? We probably should have had a first right of refusal in our contract that if we were leasing or renting, that if he did want to sell it, he'd have to give us notice and give us an option to buy it. And that motherfucker just sold it. He was dirty and he was gone.
I mean, the move, I think, was bittersweet for people that had been involved from the beginning. I mean, obviously it was out of necessity, but because the way that the old building was structured with like the label and, and on one floor and like the studio on the other, I think that obviously changed a lot, which, I mean, I feel like in the new space, more businesses and more facets of what Patchwerk is have been able to like get pushed out. But I mean, there was a lot of history in the physical sense in terms of like what that building was. I think some of the furniture moved over. I think we kept like the purple velvet furniture, which I think is hopefully gone now. I can't remember. Yeah, I mean, it was bittersweet moving into a space that was bigger with more opportunities for like additional rooms. Obviously, increases the capacity for like what the studio could put out. But still, I mean, just the fact that so many incredible pieces of music were created in a space that's now leveled and it's a parking lot or whatever it is. I mean, it's very interesting. But I mean, you do have those tangible musical outputs from it. So I don't know. I have like my 995 memories and then like the memories of this studio. So